The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Day with StrataCom. Today we have Eric Kruger. He is one of our senior consultants and also a principal owner of StrataCom. I'm hoping that everyone can hear me. I'm kind of leading. Usually you're probably used to hearing Laura Walker, and I'm filling in. If someone could just maybe raise their hand or send me a chat that you can hear me, that'd be great. Then we know that we're in business. I'm guessing people can hear me, but I didn't get any responses. Eric, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
But do we have any of our folks on here?
Okay. Yep, we're good.
We're good? Okay.
Yep. Sorry about that. Just making sure so I don't spew and nobody can hear me. So today, Eric's going to talk about CMDB best practices. First off, for those who are not familiar with StrataCom, I'll tell you a little bit about us. And we've been focused on ITSM since '97. We've been a Cherwell partner for about 7 years now, mostly focused on implementations and phase 2 projects, health checks, upgrades, just about anything Cherwell. All of our consultants have that tool knowledge and also ITIL best practice knowledge. All of our staff is W-2 employees, and we've developed some maps that maybe some of you are familiar with, and more recently we're working on a mobile solution and also Active Directory integration pack. So there's some new things that we're working on as well. So with that, I'll just say that the webinar today I'll be recording. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the question box on the right. And as we're going along, I might interrupt Eric if there's a question that pops up instead of keeping them all towards the end. But feel free to ask questions, and I'll try and get to as many as I can. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eric.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I think this is scheduled for an hour and a half, our standard practitioner call length, and this is the first time I'm doing this presentation, so I don't really know how long it's going to go. I'm guessing about 40 minutes to 50 minutes, somewhere maybe that 45-minute mark. So we should have plenty of time for questions and other things. I think we should have like an open discussion, so if people have questions they want to bring up. There's almost 150 people on this call, so maybe somebody has an answer if somebody has a question. So, all right, so let's get going on CMDB. So, we've had a lot of interest in CMDB lately. A lot of companies either starting CMDB projects or partway through a CMDB project, and we've been working with customers in their CMDB. Probably it really got big and popular maybe 10, 12 years ago. People started really focusing on CMDB and application mapping and defining business services and attribute management and all of those things, software management. So we're going to talk about it today and hopefully get a little bit of good information. So we'll talk about what is CMDB, what products does Cherwell have to support that CMD concept. Also, we'll talk about managing lifecycle in your CMDB, so asset lifecycle, creating relationships in your CMDB and what can you do with those relationships, integrations to other sources of truth for CMDB data, and I've got like a potential CMDB roadmap for somebody who doesn't have a CMDB and wants to start, or maybe you're partway through your CMDB and wonder what's next. I did a roadmap based on starting simple and kind of working your way into the more complex things. So first, what is a CMDB? It's a configuration management database, just a database. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, CMDB is just a database. And that's really all it is, just a database used by an organization to store information about hardware and software assets, and maybe some other things, locations or buildings, you know, some other people. These are commonly referred to as CIs. So when you talk about your database that holds your CIs, you might talk about your CMDB, and when you talk about the things that are in your CMDB, you may refer to them as CIs. That's common language. The database acts as a data warehouse for the organization and stores information regarding the relationships between its assets or CIs. The CMDB provides a means of understanding the organization's critical assets and their relationships, such as information systems, upstream sources or dependencies of assets, and downstream targets of assets. So some of that relationship management. That's really more of an advance, but I'll talk quite a bit about relationships and what they're good for, what you can use them for in Cherwell. So CMDBs essentially hold two types of data. They hold discoverable information, so information you may have in another system, SCCM or SolarWinds or Atrium or some other system that holds information about your CIs. So this would be hardware information, CPU, RAM, hard drives, network connectors, information like that. It could also be software information like installed programs, services, last user login. So that's all things that's discoverable and it's known, and essentially it's unmanaged, right? You don't manage it anywhere. A system just goes out, queries some device, and pulls back the information on it. So, and that could be a router, that could be a printer, that could be a laptop, a server. We're getting into like IoT. It could be lots of different. It could be a refrigerator in the future. And then also non-discoverable information, also known as managed information. So this is information that you need to manage, and it could be 5 things, it could be 100 things, it could be 1,000 things, but it's information that's not discoverable, but it's something you know about the device: location, who's the owner, what is the support group, so and any other important data that's not discoverable but needs to be managed. So, and that's kind of the big difference between a CMDB and just a discovery tool. Where a discovery tool, a lot of people don't use those to manage kind of some of this non-discoverable information, and that's one of the main purposes of a CMDB is to manage that information. Some people call it portfolio information if they're managing assets and services as part of a business portfolio, but that's important information to manage in your CMDB. So the first question you should ask is, should I use Cherwell as my primary CMDB? So, you know, there's a lot of products out there that are just focused on CMDB. I name a few of them in one of the later slides. But should you use Cherwell? If you've got Cherwell, Cherwell has a CMDB module, should you consider using Cherwell as your core CMDB product? I don't know. If it works for you, I would say yes, it would work fine. So Cherwell has a lot of good features and a lot of good reasons to use it as your primary CMDB. So extremely flexible input methods. So one of the things about a CMDB is that you may have data being discovered by multiple systems or being stored in multiple systems, disparate systems throughout your organization. And one of the goals of the CMDB is to pull everything together so you have one view of your data. Now we could talk about federated or put it all in one spot, or where are you going to manage it, or is it just a view? Is it just reports? But for a lot of organizations, it does make sense to pull that information into your Cherwell system, into their CMDB, and then put your non-discoverable layer of information over the top of that. And so your source of truth for a lot of that, say, network servers might be SCCM, but you pull that SCCM data in, and you're managing who's the owner, where is it at, all that information on it. So it's got extremely flexible input methods. You can get data into Cherwell pretty simply You can do it with REST API calls, either polls or pushes. So Cherwell's got a pretty powerful workflow engine that can pull data from a system via REST, and also a REST API that you can use to input data to Cherwell. You can do direct database connections. That's probably the most simple and straightforward from a Cherwell. It may be a little more complex architecturally for you, but as far as Cherwell, if you can just create a view in your source system and kind of flatten the data out so you can pull it into Cherwell, it's extremely simple. And flat file imports, I mean, if you want to do flat file imports, you can. That's one way to get the data. Maybe out of some of these older systems that don't have other ways to get the data out of them, you can export and import flat file imports. So Cherwell also has a very expandable CMDB schema, right? So you can expand the schema out. You can have multiple device types. You can have multiple fields per device type. And it allows you to build out your non-discoverable attribute management field, and also your discoverable. But mostly you'll be building out your non-discoverable, your managed attributes. And in addition, Cherwell's UI developer allows admins to quickly build UIs for CMDB managers to upkeep the CMDB data. So you can build multiple forms on top of the data for people to manage it. So if you've got groups that you want to have managed specific pieces of data, you can build a form for them just to manage those pieces so they don't have access to anything else to manage. So very flexible, and its flexible relationship management tool allows endless possibilities for relationship mapping. So, if you're a Cherwell developer, Cherwell really relies heavily on its relationship management to manage data elements throughout the tool. So it's got some pretty powerful relationship management just for CMDB that are really helpful. And of course, it's got powerful reporting tools and dashboards, and of course, you can build whatever you want in dashboards or reporting in order for people to see the data that's in your CMDB. So what other tools does Cherwell have in that CMDB space? Like what else does Cherwell have that you can just put in to help you along your CMDB journey? So Cherwell's core CSM tool has the main CMDB database, but besides that, Cherwell has some other products that might help you in your journey. The first one I'll talk about is CAM, that's Cherwell's asset management solution. So if you don't have a current discovery solution, CAM does a really good job at discovering all your Windows devices. So agent or agentless, the agent does the best job of discovering, but anything running Windows, it does an extremely good job at discovering Windows. And all the software that's running on there, all the hardware, and it's really accurate and really does a good job. It also does a really good job, or an extremely good job, at discovering virtual environments. So this is host and VM running on those hosts. So you can point it at your VMware or Hyper-V environments, and it will discover all the underlying plus all the hosted machines on there. So it does support Mac, Linux, and Unix discovery, and it does a decent job of discovering the hardware and software installed on those devices. There's no agent. There's sort of an offline discovery that you can use. It's not really an agent, creates a file, but if you can figure out how to get that file to your CAM database, that'll work. It also does like a scheduled scan, which works great for like your server infrastructure because they're always on. So the scheduled scan works good for that. But with the Mac desktops, it can be a problem, especially if a lot of laptops, if they're shut down at night or not connected to the wire. Like, when do you run that? So maybe not as good of a solution for that. And then kind of at the bottom of the list, network discovery. CAM also does network discovery. Results may vary. So it's not as accurate in network discovery. There's just so many variations on network devices out there, and it's extremely difficult for CAM to discover all of them and know exactly what they are. So it might even discover like a printer as a switch because maybe the printer's got a built-in switch. So just weird things like that pop up. So I kind of put the discovery in order of importance, or how well of a job it does. But CAM's real expertise though, software license management. So really good on the software side. So it does a great job discovering hardware attributes, but it's really built around managing software licenses. And so you can get that license information into CSM via the CAM map. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Extremely useful for managing your software license. Does not have any capabilities for mapping relationships between CIs and business service. So that doesn't have even a business service concept in CAM, and it just isn't any mapping capability there. I think some people may have heard it has that, but it just doesn't. CAM does know what software titles are running. So, for instance, on your server infrastructure, and that may be you may be able to use that to help you with your mapping. So it'll tell you, hey, all these servers are running SQL Server, all these servers are running IIS. So it knows, on your server infrastructure, it can help you identify what's running what software. And it'll actually link those software titles to those servers in CSM. So that's another piece you may want to look at, especially if you want to do license management. License management's the core. So license management sort of part is CMDB. So if you're interested in that, I'd look at it. It doesn't, over and above the license management, like the hardware discovery, it really wouldn't discover anything else that other discovery tools wouldn't already discover. But if you're not using anything, it does a really good job at hardware discovery too.
Hey, Eric, could I just interrupt you with a question? One that came through since you're on CAM. A question came in is, what are the cons of attempting to do CAM using the CMDB?
Well, there's, I guess, I wouldn't use CAM as my CMDB, but it's a great feeder into CSM CMDB. One of the big benefits of it is that there's a built-in integration with this Cherwell CAM map, right? So that's a big benefit. The cons around CAM is it can do like purchase requests and some of that type of information, but it's really not meant to be a tool to manage your assets. Even as something as simple as managing non-discoverable attributes is kind of a pain in CAM. There really isn't a good interface for that. And even something as simple as adding a custom field in CAM, which you can do. You can add a custom field to a device, so you can see location. You can add location, but it doesn't show up in the grid. There's no way to get it to show up in the grid, so you can't sort by location. You can't. Then you end up having to use one of the fields that's not used. There's just a lot of limitations to the CAM tool as far as user interface. There's really no workflow in there. There's no workflow engine or anything. You can't automate anything. So it's a pretty good tool for doing purchases and saying, hey, I bought these desktops. I'm going to assign them to these users, and then when CAM discovers them, it creates the physical asset, and the assignment to the user is there. But even managing the assignment kind of not great. I mean, you have to manage the assignment on the line item of the purchase. You can't manage it at the asset level. So there's just some real UI issues with CAM where managing assets becomes a problem. But if you use CAM to discover those assets and discover all the software and all the users in your organization and send everything over into CSM, it worked great for that.
Okay, yeah. Another one came through. Right now, the CMDB imports the CAM discovery workstations as assets, but when computers are renamed or removed, it does not sync the data to CMDB. It just imports the data as if from CAM and leaving the existing assets and creating many duplicates. How can we prevent this? Right now, I have to manage AD, then I have to manage CAM. I do not want to have to go into CMDB and manually delete the assets. How can we sync the two?
That is a problem with CAM to CMDB. So CAM has the concept of putting items in the a deleted folder, but the map currently doesn't do anything with that. So it is a problem. So for some customers, we've just done like duplicate deletion scripts against their CSM database. Cherwell doesn't really have a solution for that I know of or I've ever used. And we haven't really even implemented one for a customer ever, where the data is deleted out of CAM and it goes and deletes it in CSM. So it can be a whole everything. It can be a whole. Serial number can be your key. If you use serial number as the key instead of name, then when things are renamed, you don't get those duplicates. But yeah, I've worked with a lot of customers that have duplicate data coming from CAM. So it almost does have to be more of a process to right now manually delete it. I'm just not aware of any automated way of deleting assets out of CMDB and Cherwell that come in from CAM. So if anybody has got one, I'm sure people would love to hear about it, but it hasn't been important enough for any of our customers yet for us to develop something, and Cherwell hasn't put anything out to really manage that either.
Is CAM better if you have the CSM map, Eric?
Well, in order to get the data into CSM, you need that map. So, but it doesn't really affect anything CAM does. So it just helps you move the data into CSM out of CAM. So Cherwell's CAM Map 2 is the newest release, and that integrates CAM with CSM. It works really well to move hardware and software info from CAM's discovery capabilities into CSM, and it does extend the CSM CMDB schema. So it does add quite a few fields. It does add a lot of CAM specific fields, but it also adds a lot of like just general fields that CAM stores data in and puts into CMDB. So it also matches more closely Microsoft's SCCM schema, because one of the most common imports we do is SCCM to CAM and then CAM to CSM. So if you don't have CAM, you might still want to look at putting this map in. It's a really easy way to expand your schema and the forms and all that. It does add a bunch of other objects that are CAM related that you probably wouldn't use, but it really is an easy way to get the SCCM schema built out real quick in your CAM database or your CSM database, your CSM CMDB. Another thing you could look at is Cherwell facilities management, if facilities is part of your CMDB strategy. So some companies manage their facilities, like data centers as part of their facility. You could have building-sized UPS equipment that's part of your facilities. So facilities management is a map you can put in to help manage those facilities, and you could help tie that into your CMDB. So it's kind of an outlier, but it's definitely out there. And if you have things that fall into your CMDB that are also facilities, but you want to manage those differently, facilities uses the concept of work orders, which is common in facilities. But you can manage some CMDB type items with facilities management. StrataCom's Red Essentials. I know a lot of you probably are using this. A lot of our customers are using this map, but it can help you manage your CMDB information. So it can really help you manage your DevOps environment. So Red just stands for requirements, enhancements, and defects. So it's very like DevOps, like, you know, it helps you manage multiple releases. You can manage it against CIs. You know, DevOps, you may be performing hundreds of software changes to changes to a software CI in a month or even a week. So it just makes it an easier way to track those changes against the CI. And you could integrate it to some like versioning or something like that on the CI if you wanted to use that to maintain a version. A lot of DevOps are not even really versioning anymore. But it allows you to see that more comprehensive history of all the changes that have been done than a typical change management ticket. So you may roll, 20 or 30 defects into a release, and you may or may not even manage that with a change. Some companies are managing releases with change. Some aren't. Some DevOps, they're just doing constant pushes every hour, every 2 hours. So, but at least helps you see like what was that? What was it a requirement? What has been pushed out? So, and it's mostly around software, but what's the requirement? Was there enhancement we did for the software? Was there defects that we fixed? What are these pushes for? So that can kind of help you manage some of your CMDB items, especially on the software side. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about mapping in a little bit. So one of the first questions we usually get is, aren't there tools out there to map my CIs and services? So yes, there are quite a few tools out there. Cherwell doesn't have a product that's discovery and mapping. So they have CAM that does some discovery, but it doesn't do mapping. You can do mapping within Cherwell CMDB, but it doesn't do discovery. So they don't have a product that does discovery and mapping. So we do have, I've worked with lots of these tools, these UCMDB tools or CMDB tools. Generally, using these tools, you end up with too much data, too many relationships mapped, because a lot of them work. They either are packet sniffing between devices. They're looking at, they might be looking at configuration for some standard applications. So what I've found is that most of these tools, if you end up working with them, they're still pretty user intensive, because you end up pulling a lot of the relationship mapping out because it's either not important or not a real relationship, or you just don't want to track it. It's too much. So I've worked with a lot of companies that have used those tools, and they clean up. You end up doing a lot more cleanup. So it does a lot of the mapping for you, but almost too much. You know, popular choices that I've worked with: Extra Hop, BMC's Atrium, Micro Focus UCMDB, all those tools. They're quite expensive, and you just have to justify. You know, is it worth the cost of buying this tool? Still, I'm going to have probably 1 or 2 resources allocated to managing this tool and managing the data that comes in and making sure the relationships are right and correct. And you know, they all do discovery too, so they'll discover your infrastructure and then do relationship mapping. They just cannot do mapping to business services, because business services, business applications, they're just not discoverable. So some of your most important mappings, business services to CIs, they just cannot do automatically, because those are just conceptual. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but they can't do that. So if you're looking at, you know, what can I do to help this along, there's tools out there. It's just a matter of, you have to make the decision. Is it worth buying the tool if I have to have all this man hours to work with the tool, or can I just do it in Cherwell CMDB manually and maintain it manually via change management? And I'll talk a little bit about the process that you can use to manage that in a little bit, but we always get the question, what's out there? And, you know, Cherwell has sponsored a couple different products in the past, or, you know, recommended a couple different products in the past, and sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. So it's always a risk putting a new product in, but you know, you just have to look at it in a way, is it worth the cost? Because none of these tools are cheap. If they're super cheap, it didn't hardly cost anything, then they'd probably be worth it, but the cost, some of these are extremely high. Okay, so what are some of the popular inventory tools, and how do we get this data into our Cherwell CMDB? So SCCM is number one. It seems like everybody's got SCCM. Configuration, so that's Microsoft's Configuration Manager, part of their operations management tool set. So super common is SCCM to CAM. CAM does a great job then in pulling the license data out of SCCM and tracking license usage. And then from there, you can just push all the CAM data well, actually CSM pulls the CAM data out of CAM. So that works really well. If you have CAM, that's probably the recommended way to get SCCM data in, because they're all built-in integrations. I mean, you have to put the map in, but CAM has a built-in integration to SCCM, and CSM has the map to pull the data in from CAM. So the next SCCM to CSM CMDB, there's no pre-built integration. If you go look at the map for that, it's just the instructions on, hey, it basically says build some views and then pull them into CSM CMDB. So still fairly simple. I mean, you can build some views, although we've run into a lot of customers that will not build views on their SCCM database because they claim that Microsoft says that's unsupported to build a view. So then you end up building the view like on the CSM database that will poke out to the data in the SCCM database. So you can run into some architectural issues there and support issues with Microsoft if you're going directly from SCCM into CSM. So your results may vary depending on mostly depending on your SCCM folks and how flexible they are to work with you. SolarWind's pretty popular. SolarWind's kind of the same thing, no pre-built integration. Same thing, there's a map that's basically just instructions, build a view, pull it into CSM CMDB. It's still pretty simple. I mean, most of the data that you want out of SolarWinds or SCCM, it's pretty standard data. No CAM integration at all to SolarWinds. So if you want to get SolarWinds information into CAM, you're just out of luck. You just cannot build integrations into CAM. You'd have to do database to database and direct integration, and it's just not worth it. I don't think.
Hey,
You're
Eric,
better off just using CAM for discovery. Yeah.
have you ever heard of one called Logic Monitor, similar to SolarWinds? Okay.
Nope, I haven't. But if it's database based, running on a database within your organization, the easiest way to pull data out is, with a view. If it's not, you may be able to pull data out with a REST integration, like ExtraHop. Like I wrote a REST integration. They have a really good API. So to pull the data in from ExtraHop, I just wrote a PowerShell script that I didn't even do it in Cherwell. I just did it in PowerShell, kind of middleware, but pulled the data out of ExtraHop and then inserted it into Cherwell with a PowerShell script. So a lot of the newer tools have REST APIs that you can do that stuff with pretty simply.
Another one, Eric.
Yeah.
How do you match CIs with SolarWinds data? Is it a unique key?
Yeah, you have to decide on what the unique key is. You got to figure that out. So I do have a slide that mentions that, but that's usually the challenge. What is our unique key? So it's pretty simple with desktops and laptops. They usually have a serial number. They're usually physical assets, and that's usually pretty simple. Pretty much any hardware discovery is going to pull that serial number out, and then you can use that as a primary key. Servers get a little more complex, especially virtual servers. So you really got to figure out what your primary key is. Is it name, like server name? Is that your primary key? Is it something else? But that's part of your challenge of getting this data in is defining your primary key from your sources, because you need to be able to update that data in CSM from that system. So a lot of systems have an internal key that they use to identify assets. I know the popular CMDB tools all do. Atrium, UCMDB, some of those big enterprise, they all have an internal key that you can use. You can store in Cherwell's CMDB and use that as the key. I'll let you know, SolarWinds I'm in the process of importing right now, but I haven't looked at the data enough to know what the key is going to be for this customer. So, but I will know shortly.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge, pulling this data into CMDB. Probably the biggest architectural challenge is deciding on a key that you're going to use from these sources so you don't get the duplicate data. Operations Manager, that one, if you use an Ops Manager, you can pull it right into CAM. CAM does have a pre-built Ops Manager integration you can use to pull the data in, and then, of course, CSM will pull it right out of CAM. If you want to get into CSM, you're in the view game again, so there's no real out of the box integration to CSM from Ops Manager. But just some ideas what you have to do to get the data in. And if you have CAM, you have a little advantage on a couple of these. I don't know if it's worth buying CAM just to get the data out of SCCM into CSM, but it is pretty slick. It's pretty easy. Okay, so one of the things you can do in Cherwell CMDB is manage lifecycle of assets. So if your CMDB is acting as a centralized repository for your assets, you can set it up to manage inventory of some CIs. I talk about, in a little bit, I'll talk about more inventory, but you can do a simple inventory with assets in your CMDB just by providing a status of an asset of like in inventory or something like that, or available. So, you can do that, just simple lifecycle management, basically just changing a status field. Maybe you manage it with change management, but you can manage very simply the lifecycle of an asset in the CMDB just with a simple status. Infrastructure can be managed with lifecycle attributes like in production, waiting assignment, disposed. You can have your environment, QA environment, production, so you can manage some of those things. Employee CIs like laptops, desktops, phones, things like that can be managed the same way, just basically with a status. So very simple way to manage asset lifecycle, and you can do it just with a single field in CMDB. There's lots of other ways to do it, but that's a simple way. You can also do, yeah.
Hey, Eric, do you know of any other good asset management tools for computers, other than CAM and SCCM that work with Cherwell's product, with CSM?
I don't know of any that have like an out-of-the-box integration. Really anything that you use to manage assets, you're probably going to have to build some sort of custom integration into Cherwell. I think there's very little out there that's out of the box. There might be some. I guess I haven't looked through the map store. Normally, I don't know if some of my other consultants are on. Maybe they found something that somebody's using that's out there. But if you want pure asset management, like to manage your financials and things like that, a lot of companies have products like that. But you're probably going to end up pulling that data into CMDB with something custom. I just don't know of anything out there that works out of the box with Cherwell that has an integration to Cherwell out of the box.
Okay, one of our attendees, Melissa, said that CG4 is a good asset management tool that's worked with Cherwell and is used for hardware type assets.
All right, I've never heard of it, but
FYI for the rest of the group.
Yeah, there you go. CG4 might work for you. Cherwell's also got this ITAM purchase request through receiving map, and this can help you kind of manage purchases and do real inventory in Cherwell. So it can be installed to manage your CMDB's lifecycle even more. So it does include inventory functionality. It allows you to receive assets and mark them for distribution, and you can have different inventory sites and all sorts of things with actual inventory. The supplier and supplier catalog items are significantly modified to support the purchasing request and receiving process. And other items include more location type information. It is a pretty intensive map to implement. If you look through the directions, there's quite a bit of manual stuff you have to do, and it does tie into a lot of the objects that you've probably already modified in your Cherwell environment. So we've implemented it before. I've never done it myself, but I've got some consultants that are pretty familiar with this map. We usually plan on at least a week to implement this thing, unless you're just out of the box, just because it touches so many parts and pieces of Cherwell. And then you might have to upgrade to even get it, because you have to be on a certain platform release or app platform release to get it. So there's just a lot of, I don't want to say issues, but it's one of the more complex maps to implement.
Hey, so, Eric, somebody had mentioned that map may have been pulled from the map store, and that there might be a new ITAM map coming out.
That could be.
So just didn't know if you had any insight on that.
I don't. Tony Staus might. He's worked with it pretty recently. I don't know if he's on this call, but he might have more information about that. Yeah, I don't know why they'd pull it. It worked okay. But maybe they're adding a bunch more stuff to it, or maybe it may not have worked with the newest releases of Cherwell. That's definitely a possibility.
Well, then my buddy David Savoie just said that he just downloaded it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so we'll have to search.
There was definitely an older one that they pulled, and there's a newer one that was released about a year. I want to say about a year ago. That we've been using. I don't think that one's been updated in a year. So I do think there were some issues with that not working with the newer versions of Cherwell, but it may have been just something as simple as you could change the versions it would work with, and it actually worked.
Yeah, and that's what Jason just pointed out. It's available, but doesn't work with 9.4 or newer.
Okay.
So anyway,
Yeah, I think you'd probably get it to work with it, but if you're interested in it, I would just kind of wait and see if Cherwell comes out with something newer. I know I've messed around with some of these maps where they say they don't work with the newer version, but then you find out, oh, you can just go in there and change the versions it works with in the XML file, and it'll work great because they just never updated the versions that it's compatible with. But some of these versions too have pretty significant changes in some of the underlying tool set. So there may be something that in the map that just doesn't work right with the new version. So I'm not sure what versions we've successfully put this thing into, but it is a pretty neat little map. It does integrate with CAM if you have CAM, but you don't have to have CAM for it to work. It'll create the purchase order in CAM. So if you are managing POs in CAM, it'll create it in CAM, and you can keep managing it. And so you can order something out of your service catalog, and it'll go and through the whole life cycle and create the check the stock, see if it's in inventory. If it's not, it'll create a purchase request, and then it goes through purchasing, and someone orders it, and it gets in the inventory, and then it can integrate with CAM. So it's kind of more a full life cycle management if you really want more process around it, rather than just kind of managing attributes of some of these things. It can give you that. But once again, results may vary on what version you're on, what version you can download.
well, and
how long it takes you to get to work.
I don't know if you know this, but if you did put it in 9.3 and then upgraded to 9.4, what would happen?
It would probably still work because if you just did the binary upgrade, it would almost certainly work. If you put in the 9.4 content packs, that's where you may have to start you end up doing your code merging. I know Kim in January did I think it was one of these calls, but did like binary versus content pack upgrades. So you should definitely, if you're interested in that upgrading, look at that recording. Was that Practitioner called, Steve?
Yeah, it was. It was. Yeah,
okay.
I think it was just last month's.
Yeah. Okay.
Upgrades versus content packs or something like that. Is a good one.
Yep. So the binary upgrades, you're not getting a lot of the new content that Cherwell's putting out, but you can do a content upgrade. So I'm guessing if you're on 9.3 and have this map and do a binary upgrade, you'll be fine. But if you try to apply the content upgrade, that's probably where you're going to run into the issues. I'm not saying it's not going to work, but you probably will have to do create a blueprint and merge and do all those fun things that you get to do with the content upgrades. So it's usually not too bad. It's not like some of these other apps we've worked with where the upgrade takes 6 months, but you may spend a day or two trying to get everything to work right.
Thanks, Eric.
So one of the things CMDB with the power of Cherwell, you can map CMDB items to CIs to other objects. You can map it to people. Super popular. Who's the owner? Who's the primary user? Who's the business approver? So you're getting more into data-driven workflow. So super common for us to implement for a customer, help a customer implement change, and they're doing business approvals based on business approver on the CI. So all we're doing, they're attaching the CI to the change, and then all we do is look at the business approver, and that can be a group or a person. But things like that really common. Who's you attach a CI to an incident. Well, who's the primary support group? If primary support group is on the CI, you can have the incident assign it to the primary support group automatically. So a lot of good links to other lookup data in there. So groups of users, locations, you can link it to locations, sites, campus, your rack, things like that. And then also business services. So business services and or business application, conceptual CIs. And you can use this linking functionality to help manage your CMDB attributes as well as drive business functionality, like I talked about the approvals or the auto assignments. So let's talk a little bit about conceptual CIs. I talked a little bit about it. So CMDBs can also store conceptual CIs. These are CIs that do not physically exist, but they're a combination of their underlying physical CIs. So generally created manually, and they don't have any discoverable data. They have the CIs that make them up may be discoverable, but these are more conceptual. So a data center might be a conceptual CI. A corporate campus might be a conceptual CI. Business applications, SAP accounts receivable, email, a business service, wireless networking, VPN access, employee onboarding. So some of those things that you might be wondering, why are you talking about business applications and business services? So I've seen a lot of customers do both. So in the old days, 5-6 years ago, people were just talking about business services, but now it's common for them to split them up between a business service and a business application because they have so many darn applications that they use in their enterprise, and they really want to differentiate. Are we just having a problem with an app, or is an entire service having an issue? So, and business applications could make up a business service. So I like to make that differentiation if possible, just because it really cleans things up on creating business. It makes it a lot easier to create business services then if you've got also the concept of a business application. And like I said, they can be mapped to their underlying physical CIs for incident reporting, impact analysis, in change management. So the most common conceptual CIs we see are business services. So some companies define business services and business apps, like I said. Business apps can make up a broader business service, but for some, the business application might be at the top level. That might be what's affected, what's out. Well, what's out? Well, it's our SAP accounts receivables out. Business services should be defined by the business as a whole and represent important parts of the infrastructure that can be clearly defined as working or not working. So that's one thing. Like a lot of times you see a system that comes out of the box with a business service and it's networking, right? And networking is not a good business service because it's too broad. I mean, very few companies have a business service that's networking. They might have 100 different networks. So, and very rarely will networking be down, but part of your network might be down. So better examples, guest wireless access, VPN services, your corporate intranet. So kind of split those things up into things that you can put SLAs on or that people would call about. So when you're building your business services, try not to focus on broad, generalized business service. You might roll all those up into like a business category of networking if you want to see how your networking has done over the past year, but nobody's going to call and say, hey, well, they might call and say, I don't have networking, but it's not going to be your networking business service. It'll be a subset, some part of that.
Hey, Eric, do you recommend, do you have a suggestion on how many levels to display on the maps? A customer currently has it set to 3, which show the linked application CIs to the servers, but it takes forever for the map to load.
Oh, like the this little map I'm showing here? I don't know why it would take. That might just be a performance thing that you could fix. I mean, I would recommend, that's fine. I mean, you can go down as far as you want.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's really a limit. I mean, it typically, if you look at some of the out of the box data, I mean, they're going down. They have link to link to link to link, and it's coming up pretty quick. There are some tables that are involved there. So if you're having a performance issue, I would take a look at that. Run your health check, and see if it kicks out any indexes on like your device tables, your CMDB tables, or any of the related tables. Yeah, it shouldn't really take that long to come up. So if you have a lot of CIs and you're having a performance problem and you have these maps, you probably can fix the performance problem. I would say map out to as many levels deep as you need, and then if you have a performance problem, fix the performance problem. You shouldn't really have any slowness there.
Okay, yeah, and Ray mentioned that maybe maybe look at the relationships that are loading. It can slow down significantly.
Yeah, there could be some other issue there. So, and it's got the upstream, downstream relationships, and then kind of this related CIs that the quote unquote business services use. So, yeah, you might have to take a look at what's going on there.
Yep. Thanks.
So if you can use your CMDB, the mappings, to manage change and prevent incidents. So this is kind of where people want to end up. Usually when I talk to a customer about CMDB, this is what they mean. This is what they want. They want to be able to map their underlying CIs to some sort of business app or business service, so that when they say, hey, this server is going to be down for maintenance, what does it affect? And then so with the relationship linking, you can do that, right? You can say, hey, this server is going to be down. It's going to affect these systems or these business services. And then each one of those might have outage windows. And so if you're doing a change outside an outage window, it might need an approval, or maybe you're just asking for approvals for all those business services owners if the CI is going to go down. So especially if, the CI might be a SAN, it might support multiple databases, which supports multiple applications, which may be business applications. So, you may have some CIs that are pretty far down the chain that may affect multiple systems. And that's what a lot of people want to see. Hey, if I update this LUN on this SAN to a new firmware version, it's going to take 45 minutes. This database uses that LUN. What does that all affect? What are all the business apps that those are going to affect? And then you can let people know. So, you can prevent unplanned outages, i.e. incidents. If you do that, you can send emails out to the business owners of those if there is an incident. So there's just a lot of advantages of doing this mapping. You can generate approval records based on the underlying affected CIs, if they're linked up to business applications or business services. So it's important to do that to prevent unplanned outages, and also to notify people if there is an unplanned outage that it is down. You can notify the right people.
What version of Cherwell is this map that you're showing?
952.
952.
Yeah,
okay.
It's right out of 952 demo system. And you do have, it's for email, the email system, and you do have to check the little box to show I can't remember what it's called now. It's called like other CIs, I think. So there's nothing in the upstream and downstream of this system in the out of the box. But if you check the little box to show the other CIs and then hit your relationship map, you will get this picture.
Okay, yeah, the question from Scott was, how do you show two arrows between items?
Oh, so those are like upstream and downstream relationships to systems.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. I just hit show map or whatever that little button was, and it popped this up for me. Oh, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good view of what you'll see. So, and that's all the way up to like mail. So that's everything that's kind of involved in mail, plus all the other things that it's basically everything attached to everything else, that all the way down to all the way up to mail server.
Okay, he's on 9.2 and just shows one arrow currently.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is 952, so I'm not sure when this widget was enhanced, but this is just out of the box 952.
Okay. Another question was if we will see a logical representation of upstream, downstream, rather than the color scheme here.
There's a whole bunch of different views of this. I think there's like 6 or 8 different views. If you want to see logical, I guess I don't know what they mean, but you can see on the CIs, like the upstream and downstream related records on the tabs, of course. There are a bunch of different views of this widget that you can look at. This is just the first one, but they all kind of do the same thing. They just are different order. I don't know, I didn't investigate all the different views of this thing and what they all look like. Well, I guess I did look at every one, but they all look similar. Some of them were straight up and down, some were across, some were in a circle. But they all kind of look the same.
Okay.
So starting your CMDB mapping journey, or even your CMDB, well, this is your CMDB mapping journey. So starting that, and then after this, I have a little roadmap of your whole CMDB journey. So if you're looking at just CMDB mapping, if you're just looking at starting that, start small, bite off a manageable chunk. So pick a few well-rounded business services or business applications to map your CIs from. So as you will find, this will take a tremendously long time for you to accomplish, and you will never finish it. You'll always be updating these things. So you can do it as a project to get it going, but you're going to have to put some process eventually around managing this as more of part of your operating business. How we can do this as part of doing business instead of like being in constant project mode trying to get all these things done. So during the mapping process, you'll discover what CI types are out there that you need to map. So when you're mapping, say, a business application or business service, you'll find out, oh, we've got SANs, we've got database servers, we've got database applications that are clustered and they run on, we've got cluster, we've got F5, we've got, there's lots of different CIs that are your infrastructure that you're gonna run into. So then you'll kind of know, okay, for this business application or this service, these are the device types we need to focus on. We need to get these into Cherwell CMDB so that we can map them. So then you go, well, what are our sources of truth for these CI types? Well, we've got something for F5. We've got the Cisco app that we manage all our routers with. We've got an EMC or Dell app that we manage all our SANs with. So you've got all these different apps maybe you're doing management with. We've got SCCM for discovery of servers. How we get all that data into CMDB. So that's your next step. The architect a strategy on how to import the necessary CIs into Cherwell CMDB. So for each one of these types, where does it come from? How do we get it into Cherwell? Is it just a flat file import? Is it a real-time database view and update? Is it REST calls to pull things in? And this is important, I talked about a little bit, but this will include deciding on a primary key for these CIs. So in that other system, what is the primary key, or how do we tell what the primary key is in Cherwell CMDB, so that the next time we update the data from our source of truth, it will actually update it, not create a new CI. So important for future updates. So definitely have to do that. Then you'll physically map and move the data from the source of truth into Cherwell. So you have to map it out of your data. What fields do we need in Cherwell? What fields do we have to add? This field goes here, this field goes here, and then we get it into Cherwell. And then you can start to manage your non-discoverable data in CMDB if you want, and move on to creating your proper relationships between the CIs and your business services. So in Cherwell, you actually now are creating the relationships between your underlying CIs and your business service that you've created in there. And then kind of your final step is to configure Cherwell to take advantage of the CMDB mappings you have configured for approvals, alerts, and emails that go out for incidents or for approvals or for reviews, your SLAs, are things falling within outage windows, you're tracking downtime, maybe based on these things. So just a lot of things to do for mapping, but kind of a little idea of maybe the order of how you do this. So when you're managing your CMDB, this really is about people, processes, and technology. So some things can really be handled just by technology, the automation. This CMDB, especially the mapping, is really, it's people intensive. It will rely heavily on process to make it as less people intensive as possible, and then you need good technology to help you maintain it. So, and like I say, because the technology for automatically defining and mapping business services is essentially non-existent, your initial mapping exercise will be very a person resource intensive. So you're going to have a lot of person resources on your initial mapping. And then maintaining your CMDB mapping infrastructure rely heavily on process. So you can do things like require CI mappings as new CIs are procured. You can use change, and then maybe that's part of your change management or your other, however you're procuring those. If somebody does a request, if you're using request management to request a new VM, make part of that, well, what application does this support, or what is this for? And you make that part of your procurement process or your request process for the VM, and make it part of your change management. If you're managing change for some of these things, maybe you're repurposing a server, or moving something around, or moving something from QA to production. What application is this tied to, or what does it use storage? Does it, is it fronted by F5? So you can start to ask all these questions around these CIs. You get a new F5. What application is it fronting? Where is it at? What network segment is it on? So you start to ask all these questions as part of your procurement or request of the CI, and so you're doing it up front. You're kind of doing this mapping up front. So you're still maybe doing the mapping manually. Maybe you have like a asset manager or CMDB manager that's taking the information out of there. You could potentially automate it. If you had the data laid out correctly in the change or the request. So, and then finally the technology piece, that'll help you manage the relationships or other data storage requirements. So, and that's maybe where you could automate some of it. If you request the data in a certain way, maybe you can automate creating those relationships. It's just kind of a matter of how much automation do you want versus someone actually in charge of it, validating everything manually and making sure everything is done properly.
Hey, Eric, is there a recommended way to map a CI to a customer record in Cherwell? This customer uses CAM for their asset management and mapped CAM to CSM, but they do not know the best way to tie CIs to a customer record.
Well, CAM, yeah, it depends on where you want to do it too. So you could just add a field on your CI to your customer, your customer internal table, and do it that way. CAM does have some capability of assigning what end up to be customers in Cherwell in CAM. So if you are assigning customers in CAM, the CAM map will actually pull that data into Cherwell if you're using CAM to assign it. CAM also tracks the last person to log into a machine, and that does get pulled into CSM. So you could maybe take that data and automate a process to look up who that person is and make an actual physical link to a customer. But to me, it's probably just as simple as adding a field to your CMDB item to map it.
Robert mentioned that CAM has a primary user field.
That could be. I know it's got. I know it's got last user logged in, and it's also got like this assignment concept. I don't know if they call it primary user, but in the CAM map, maybe.
In CSM is what he meant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
yep.
Yeah, I think that's what they call it in CSM, is like the primary user. So I believe if you put that CAM map in, you'll get that field for your CIs that are mapped to something in CAM.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah, it's definitely got a lot of customers have a concept of assigned to or owner of the asset on the servers, managed by, but for desktops, laptops, kind of an owner. So unfortunately, that just isn't really discoverable because multiple people can log into an asset. So that generally has to be physically assigned or imported. So some people keep that in a spreadsheet, and we can import that into. I'd recommend importing the CSM and managing it there. So if you've got it in a spreadsheet, owner or assigned to or something like that, import it in. You can import it into CAM also. You can either import it on the purchase side and do the assignment to the asset. As long as you have the serial number, it'll work. You can do the assignment, and then that'll pull over, or you can do a custom field in CAM and import it in there, and then you'd have to modify the map in order to pull the custom field in, but that would work also. But normally I'm telling customers, if you have CSM and you're importing data and want to manage it, probably CSM's the place to do it, just because it's more flexible. And if that does turn into your CMDB eventually, that's probably where you want to have it. Now there's some stuff in CAM that maybe you want to have, because the way it tracks user assignments, and like they call it group, but it could be location assignments, group / location / whatever you make your groups. And a lot of the software reports, you can report on like all the software assigned to a group, which could be a location. So if you're doing software management by location, you may want to put that into CAM, because a lot of the reports have that in there. But generally, I'm kind of steering customers towards managing this data in CSM unless there's a really valid reason to have it in CAM, instead of just putting it in CAM and trying to figure out how to pull it into CSM. The interface is just a lot better, a lot more flexible, a lot easier to get into. Some of the things you can only manage in CAM with the Windows app, so you got to get that installed if you want to manage custom attributes on devices. There's no web app for that. So.
Did you happen to mention what you suggest for owner assignments? That's a question.
I guess it depends on where. In CSM, I would just build a field for it and manage it there. Like I said, it's not really discoverable. So you will have to manage it somewhere. Some companies are managing it in SCCM. Some companies are managing it in a spreadsheet. So if you're managing it in one of those places, it is possible to get it into CSM either via an import or some other way. It can flow from SCCM into CAM and into CSM, but there are some issues potentially with that. Just that the CAM integration to SCCM doesn't pull everything in. So some of these managed fields, you'd have to kind of modify the CAM to SCCM integration, and it's not the easiest thing in the world. So some of them are, if they're in there and just if you can see them and they're just not being mapped, it's simple, but sometimes you can't see them, so then you have to go make some modifications. But I'm generally a big fan of managing any manageable attribute in CSM, kind of your final location. If you decide on that, your life will be much easier. All right, so potential CMDB roadmap. If you're starting from scratch, where do we start? So first, start by building out your CMDB schema to support your non-discoverable attributes that you want to manage, and that just might be something like owner or assigned to, something like that, user. So find a spot for that, maybe add a field, and then import your desktop, laptop data from an external source. So that's probably if you don't have anything, that's probably where you want to start, getting your user stuff in there. So then if somebody calls in, hey, at least you can see the laptop that they have, what model it is. Almost always this is coming from SCCM. So if you have CAM, that's going to be the best. It can absolutely give you the best data for hardware and software pushed into CSM. But if you don't, you can pull it out of SCCM or even just out of, if it's in a spreadsheet and you can import it in there. That's where I would start, and then start managing that laptop CI data in Cherwell CMDB. So maybe if you have it in a spreadsheet now, maybe make a little UI for that person that was managing that spreadsheet to now manage those CIs in CSM. And keep in mind, this is a little different if you already have CAM. If you don't, if you already have CAM, you probably have a pretty good start on a lot of these things to get them into CSM. Then I'd move on to managing server information in CMDB, because that's probably your next easiest thing to get in. It's probably already in SCCM. You probably already have that. Most customers do. So import it from SCCM and then manage your attributes in there. So such as location, owner, is it production, non-production, things like that. So start to manage those in CSM. Then you can move on to other complex infrastructure items. So databases, how we're going to get in there, your enterprise software, app-specific application servers, web servers, mass storage devices, network devices, cloud and SaaS services. You can have those in there. And then after you've got those CIs in there, then maybe start defining some business services. And you can do any combination of the things that I have in there. Maybe you just need databases and storage. So if you've got desktops, laptops, servers, database instances, and storage, maybe that's all you need to support most of your business applications. So then start to define business services and/or applications. Start to define them and think about what those are and put those in. And then move the portfolio management of those services and applications into CMDB. So who's the business owner of that? What's the outage window? What's the SLA information around that? And then you can start mapping a few of those business services, like physically actually attaching CIs to them from the underlying CI infrastructure. And then once you've got that, your little mini project, maybe you've got 3 business services mapped. Now you configure Cherwell change and incident and problem to take advantage of the map, your approval change, your incident outage notifications, and your problem resolution with business involvement.
So Eric, one customer thinks that they're kind of maybe mixing business services with business apps. Mm-hmm. And he was wondering if you could speak more, if you have a list of default business services.
I do not.
Speak to or have a list. But
I mean, business services are really should be decided on the business what they are. I mean, and there's not many in Cherwell, unfortunately, out of the box. I think there's 3 in the new 952. So generally, 10 years ago, say when we were helping companies figure out what their business services were, turns out 95% of them are just applications that they use, that they care about. So then kind of this concept of determining business applications. So let's just split out business applications and kind of manage those separate from our business services. So your business services, that might be something like email, really general, but you don't really have an application for it because maybe you're half in the cloud and half hosted, or you've got all this federation going on. So you can't really say, well, Exchange, because that's just part of your email. But email is not really an application that people use, although it sort of is, but there's email and calendaring, messaging, there's all these other things around it. So that's more of a business service. Anything that's not an application, of course, would be a business service if you want to split those out. So I do see a lot of customers that have, they say business service and then they're almost all applications. But really common would be some things I mentioned a little earlier, like VPN services, wireless networking, guest networking. So a lot of kind of these ephemeral ideas that are out there that a lot of things make up. You might have lots of routers and switches. You might, load balancing it's a concept, but it's not really a business service, and it's not really even a business application because load balancing is tied to, it might be a CI of a business application. And so, but your business service might be, you might have a business service that you call a payroll, and that might be made up of 4 or 5 different business applications you might have a time tracking application. You might have a, I don't know, whatever makes up payroll. So it really is. I mean, defining your business applications, your business services, and it's a tough job. I mean, look through it. My suggestion is look through incidents and see what people are calling about. And look at the description. Oh, email's not working. Oh, VPN's not working. Those are kind of the things that you can turn into business services or business applications. And then how do you define that in Cherwell? Do you use the top level as a business service or business application? I mean, that's kind of up to you and how you want to do reporting and what you've got underneath it. There's just a lot of different ways to do it. And you could probably go out and Google and find a list of standard business services, but I always hate providing a list and dragging customers one direction when they kind of have the data internal in their system already, especially if you look at incident management. People are usually calling about business applications or business services. So you want to get the terminology right so it fits your business and so that your help desk knows that, is using that common terminology. So, and also that could also go into your service catalog strategy. So your business services, in your business applications, things like that, you might be defining business catalog items also. It's the same thing as you're defining for outages.
So kind of in the same context, is there a difference between an application CI type and a business application CI type?
Yeah, for sure. So an application CI type might make up a business application. So the business application would generally be what somebody's calling about. So they might say, oh, I'm calling about I don't know, PeopleSoft payroll. They might be calling about PeopleSoft payroll, but maybe PeopleSoft payroll is made up of 4 or 5 different application CIs that are underlying. There might be multiple things that make up PeopleSoft payroll. So there's lots of things like that where sometimes a business service is just a physical, or a business application is just literally a physical application, but sometimes it's made up of multiple application CIs. So even look internally or an organization, if you're running Cherwell, well, Cherwell's, a lot of people use it, but it's really just one. It's a business application, and it's really just one application CI too, right? I mean, it really is. I mean, it is a conglomeration of lots of others, Windows services and desktop clients and admin clients and all these other things. But really, it is probably just an application CI and a business service, or a business application. But you might have other business apps that are made up of multiple application CIs. And that's the fun of mapping those out, trying to decide.
Yeah, just one more piece around that. Can you use just one CI type and use the subtype to identify it as a main application versus a business application?
Yeah, that would work.
Okay.
So whether or not it's kind of this conceptual business application or like an actual, an error with a program that you actually can see. Like I can see the error in here and I know what program it is. Yeah, you could define whether it's a business app or a regular app.
Okay.
We could do a whole call just on business services and business apps. It's a pretty complex discussion.
I'll let you continue now.
Okay, I think I'm almost done. See what's next. That's it. That was the last slide.
We got a couple minutes left here. There's a few questions. I'll try and get to as many as I can here. I mean, that's why I kind of went through asked you along the way, so we didn't have them piled up, which is good.
Yeah.
I didn't miss too many. Any suggestions for getting cloud services into the CMDB?
A lot of times, so I know they're working on some of that stuff for CAM, to look into some of these cloud services. A lot of those are essentially created manually. I mean, we're working with a customer right now that has cloud services, and their CIs, they're adding them as CIs or business services as just Office 365 or Office 365 email. I mean, they're essentially, you have to put them in manually. You can put them in your, especially like if you're a big Azure shop or AWS shop, you may have cloud services sitting out there that interact with your internal network, or maybe you don't even have an internal network. Maybe everything's cloud services, but you've got all these CIs that are out there that are hosted on Azure, that tie things together. Your federated Active Directory, or you may have web servers, and you may have virtual machines out there, and all sorts of things. So right now, I haven't really worked with any customers that have a lot of SaaS infrastructure that's importing it into their CI tool in an automated fashion. Everybody I've worked with, they're just doing it manually. If it's an important part of their infrastructure that somebody might call about, or that's important enough that they might do a change against it, or someone might call it and they might log an incident, they're just creating it manually in the system. So
yeah, that was really it, Eric.
okay.
I will be sending out this recording to everybody on the call, and to some others in the Cherwell community. So in a few days, when we zip it up nice and neat, we'll send it out to everybody that's attended or that was invited. So I would say within a week or so, expect a mailing with the recording. And other than that, a few minutes left, but we'll let everybody get back to their day. Thanks for attending, and we'll hope to see you on the next Cherwell Advanced Practitioner webinar. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.